Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone. Yes, it's July, another month down. We made it through half the year. Now we're starting the second half. Yes, Christmas is coming up and holiday. So let's get in shape this summer. Simply Snacking, who's bringing these episodes to you, is a great choice. So they have great flavors of beef and chicken, and they're individually wrapped, so you could just throw them in your purse or in your car or wherever you need to be. So it's a go-to. I'm actually out and I have to order some more, but you can order and get it. So thank you for supporting the podcast and Simply Snacking. They're getting busy too, so that's good news. All right, take care. Bye-bye. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit, and always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. This is a guest I'm really excited to have on. I think we have a lot of stuff to discuss, and I think if we talk about the cutting edge of medicine, this doctor is on the cutting edge. She was the first female, I think, graduate or fellow, right, at the University of Miami GI program. So you're tough.
Florida.
You know, Florida. The other guy said Florida. You said Miami. What the heck?
Florida.
All right, Florida.
I went to residency in Miami, but residency fellowship.
All right. So you're a tough cookie. You've been through a lot. I see you on Twitter, and you definitely are not afraid to stand up for what you believe. You're in an area of medicine I think is so cutting edge. Most of us blew it off for a lot of years, myself included. And then I started thinking about it and observing patients. I thought there's something to this, and you'll like this. I was at a conference and I spoke on the gut microbiome and some of the effects I've seen on my patients and with dietary change. And one of the head doctors around pulled me aside after the talk and said, "Brian, you can't talk about gut microbiome. There's no data on that." And I was thinking, I researched a lot of papers to look at this. And so Dr. Sabine Hazan, it's so good to have you. Thank you for joining me. And your area of expertise it's kind of crazy because most people don't, when you talk about GI, they go, "Oh my gosh, we don't want to talk about that," right? But what a profound impact it has on our health and well-being. And, I believe diet plays a role, and all these things are interacting, and we just have to figure out this interaction. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I love talking to physicians because we're like, similar in our pursuit of wanting to know the truth, right?
Yeah. And you're so passionate and you're not afraid to stand up for what's right. And I see, you take hits on Twitter, as do I. And it's hard because sometimes you see the science, someone like you who knows the science and you know what you're seeing, and you've been ahead of the curve as far as, and I actually read your book, Let's Talk Shit, right? And so, yeah, there it is right there. So, yeah. And I had it, I was dragging around people like, "What are you reading, Brian? What are you reading?" It's like, you do that. But when I saw that, and I saw that you're a funny person, you're kind and decent. And before I read your book, I actually went on Twitter and said, "Hey, who's the smartest person that you know on the microbiome? Because I don't know anything about it." And your name came up, John Chamberlain mentioned you, and he goes, here's her cell phone number, reach out. I'm like, "Oh, geez, this is kind of weird." But you were so kind, and I appreciate you coming on. And so let's talk crap for a while.
Let's talk. Yeah. So, to me, it was really not I started this path. It wasn't really about me. It was really to look at the microbiome. I felt like I was Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, right? And I need to figure out these microbes. There's a whole space of the microbiome and all these microbes that are doing something, and they're all interacting with each other. And some of them are high, some of them are low. And then where's the balance? What's the truth? And is you know, you see so much, especially in the media, like, well, take this pill, you'll lose weight, and take this pill and it's going to improve your child's autism, and then take this, it'll prevent Alzheimer's, take this and you'll live longer, right? And you look at all that and you go, well, what is the truth, right? And I'm always the type of person that I've always been the person that challenges the science, right? I'm always the person who's like, well, why should I take this? Why do I have, if I have high cholesterol, why can't I just lose weight and exercise and lose the cholesterol? Why do I have to take this pill, right? So, because I'm more minimalist, not, you know, I don't like the idea of waking up every morning and taking 20 pills. It's just not attractive to me. It's like a constant reminder that you're a patient. And then you're not living life to the fullest, right? Because you're constantly afraid. You're afraid of catching a virus. You're afraid of, you know, taking a plane. You're afraid of, and that's not the way I like to live life. I like to live life like holding on and knowing that there's a roller coaster, right? So I think to me, that was the excitement about the microbiome, was like understanding, validating, verifying what was, you know, written. So there's a paper from Dr. Adams on autism, and basically I wanted to verify what he was saying. And then, you know, so little by little, it was really a verification, validation, and then a reproducibility, because that's what research and science is all about. So if anything, I like to think of myself as the girl that says, yeah, you know what, this doctor's right, and this data is right, and I think we need to pay attention to the microbiome. I've definitely discovered a lot. I mean, if I tell you there's 52 papers that are on my dashboard of things to do, that's a minimum, because every day I add 2 more. I'm like, oh my God, we need to talk about autism and Alzheimer's, right? So there's always, or I see amazing cases. You know, I had 2 cases where I discovered spirochetes, Lyme disease in the gut, right? So I'm like, oh my God, I've got to write this, because people need to know that we can see spirochetes in the stools, in the genetic imprint. And so that's where we are, you know, discovering, learning new things. It's all in here. It's not on my computer. So I always joke with people and I say, don't hack my computers. It's not in there. It just needs, I'm a little bit of a hurricane, because I want to see, you know, when you have that thirst for knowledge and you see something and then you want to see something more and then you want to see something more. And you're like, I don't care what anybody says. I'm moving forward. I just want to see it as much as possible. That's where I'm at. I'm at the discovery phase where every day is Christmas and I'm discovering something. So
yeah, that's what's so awesome. That's what's so awesome about it, you know. And when you just say, okay, look, you have a passion, and it's like that. It's like, I want to know this. How does Alzheimer's? How does this? How does all? And so that's what I started looking at, because diet was never discussed in med school. We never really said, hey, what's your lifestyle? Are you getting enough sleep? Like, as doctors, you know, it's a badge of honor if you don't sleep. If you say, I only slept 3 hours last night, I'm still functional, you know.
Right.
It's kind of a weird thing that we're going through training and the stress and life and all that, and how it affects us. And I think at some point we lose that curiosity. What I've seen is a lot of the doctors, young doctors, they lose that curiosity. They just said, do this, this, and this. If this happens, you do this. And then there's no like thinking, oh, once if that doesn't work, what do we do next? You know, this cookie cutter.
And it's sad, because that's the art of medicine gone, right? Because to me, the art of medicine is getting to know your patient, getting to know the underlying, what's going on with your patient, finding that mystery that gets you to figure out, to put all the clues together. You know, I was just talking to a kid with autism, and I asked all those clues. You know, did the mom take prenatals when she was, you know, pregnant? Did she take medications? Was she delivering the baby by C-section, by vaginal? Was she vegan? Was she vegetarian? Did she move from another country? You know, these are all the clues you have to ask to basically then look at all your patients, 200, and see the clues and say, well, you know, C-section has a higher rate of autism, maybe, you know, boys versus girls, you know. I think that's what the beauty of medicine is being that detective, touching the patient, feeling the patient, having that relationship. Some of the most amazing discoveries for me as a physician, because I've always been the physician that's completely outside the norm. Believe me, I've gotten myself into a lot of trouble over the years stepping outside that box, right? Because it's like, well, the guideline says that, why are you doing this? And I'm like, well, I'm doing it with a consent, and I have a lawyer on standby, and I'm doing it because I want to see if that works, right? Kind of what I'm doing with fecal transplant right now. So I think if you have a relationship with that patient and you know that the patient's not going to sue you, and you have an attorney that's drafting a big consent, and you talk about the risk and you talk about the benefits, you can advance science a little bit faster. You can, go outside the path. And I think that's something doctors don't know how to do because they're so busy doing that cookie cutter medicine, which is essentially, let's just take insurances, let's just see these people 10 minutes, and then, let's just give them the guidelines because it's safe, because the American College says, this is what we believe. If you want to treat C. diff, do A, B, C, D, E, and then follow the guidelines, right? But for those patients, and this is where, I think this is where my quest started. I'm in a challenging area in Malibu. I was in a challenging area in Malibu as a gastroenterologist. And most of my patients, which are the celebrities and the high profile patients, didn't want to go to the medication routes. They didn't want me following. They were going to naturopaths. They were going to herbalists, functional medicines. The acupuncturist in town is probably the most popular physician, right? Person. And so, it was difficult for me. I kind of had to learn that world to say, wait a minute, you achieved improvement in your Crohn's disease by not taking medications? What did you do? Right? So that was my inquisitive mind as a physician. It was kind of funny that I landed in Malibu as a physician in a way, because that's so who I am. I'm the girl that doesn't follow, I'm the girl that doesn't like to take medications. I'm the girl that doesn't like to remember that I'm a patient. I like to fight it myself and be a warrior. And then I'm surrounded by all these accomplished people and celebrities that speak and everything, and they basically follow the same trend that I do. And so I said, why isn't the world looking at that? And why aren't we paying attention to what the celebrities are doing, what the wealthy patients are doing? And so that's how it kind of one thing led to another, from GI to clinical trials on fecal material in a capsule, to doing fecal transplant, to understanding the microbiome. So I speak a lot, so you're going to have to interject, because
no, I love it. My
husband says I could go on and on. So
no, me too. Once you get something that you're passionate about, you could talk forever. Those like me, when someone says, hey, tell me about low carb, I'm like, my wife looks at me like, oh no, it's going to be a long night. We're going to be talking a lot.
That's like my husband. My husband's like, oh no, microbiome, here we go again. Yeah, and my kids, they roll their eyes. They're like out.
Yeah, and it's so amazing because you think about thinking, I remember the first time I heard about fecal transplant, I'm like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, because you're going to take crap out of one person, you put it into another person, you think it's going to, just to even think about doing research in that area, I thought, these people are nutty. There's no way, it's hocus pocus. And then all of a sudden you start, I had Dr. Yoga Nathan on. I don't know if you've ever crossed paths with him, but he was talking about when you do fecal transplant that and you can say this isn't true or it is, but he said that if you take someone who's morbidly obese and they get a fecal transplant from someone, and then they do a survey 3 months later and they say, what do you crave? They used to crave pizza and cake at night. And they say, yeah, I crave kimchi. Like, that's crazy. Is that, do you see that in your experience?
100%. And people think
amazing?
I'm crazy. But let me tell you, I had a metastatic mesothelioma that I involved the FDA to do fecal transplant on her. And I decided to pick the grandson as the donor because he was the healthiest. They were really bonded together. And I'm like, you know what? And what a great story. Grandma gets the poop from her grandchild, it's her favorite grandchild. So I was like, okay, that's how I'm going to do it. So what happened is the grandmother couldn't eat. She was cachectic. Her hemoglobin was 7. Really decompensating, like she was on her last leg of cancer. And basically, I gave her grandson's microbiome, and within a week, she's craving chicken nuggets. She met me for breakfast like a couple weeks later, because we had breakfast together, because I wanted to see her, in Malibu. And she's eating 2 sides of pancakes and bacon. And I'm like, oh my God, you went from eating nothing. And actually, it helped her. And she actually lived 29 months when the metastatic mesothelioma only lived 16 months. So it did extend her. But the problem is she needed more. We were only allowed to do one. If you know anything about the regulatory with the FDA, it's a nightmare. It's paperwork. It's actually 22 pounds of regulatory paperwork, which no doctor likes to do, let alone me, who, hate filing an application. So, for me to have to do that and then to keep submitting and re-giving, and even that case was a big fight to get it approved because it was an emergency use access under the Compassionate Act, which is, was brought by Senator Johnson and the previous presidency. And so we basically were under that act and we approved this patient to do it. It was interesting to see the progression from like not being able to eat to her wanting to crave chicken nuggets. So, and I have another patient who was actually suicidal. We gave him the microbiome of an English professor who craved orange juice, and he craved orange juice as well. So imagine changing poop, no longer, making you suicidal, but on top of that, you're craving the foods that you got from the microbiome of your donor. It's pretty impressive.
That's really intriguing. And that's why it's just so interesting to see. I think about, for me, the reason I kind of went down this fecal road here with you here is, I started noticing, gosh, my hardest patients for getting off insulin and for weight loss is my middle-aged, stressed out female real estate agent. Like while we're meeting, she's like, hold on, let me send this email. I'll be right with you. Like her whole life is crazy. Right. I didn't have time to prepare food. And so I thought, well, they're just not fun. But then I'm looking at their continuous glucose markers. I see the effect of stress on sugar levels. It's crazy.
100%.
And cortisol. So and menopause and all these. So what kind of effect does this have on the reason I ask is I started researching, looking into it, and then I come across a study that's showing, look, you lose some of the dopamine receptors, so you need 3 pieces of cake instead of 1 to get that same pleasure effect. Some people just have half a cookie and they're fine for a month and they don't 100%. Need it again. And so I started thinking, well, that's kind of weird. And let me look at, so I started looking at the research, and they went back and they were showing the great research on the effect of stress on the microbiome. And it was devastating, like stressed out people, mice in that case, they're stressed all the time. Their gut mucus was messed up. There's no diversity in their microbiome. And then the other one that said Club Med, they're all fine. And then when they brought them back, they couldn't induce colitis in the non-stressed one. The stressed ones all got it. You probably saw these studies, but yes, it was so interesting. I went back and looked, and they said, well, let's go back and look at binge eating and diabetes, and go back to when mom was pregnant, when she's stressed out, having all kinds of problems, just like what you mentioned already. When she stressed out, was it C-section or vaginal birth? Huge difference. Breastfed versus bottle.
Right.
Early childhood trauma and stress, and all these things that affect the gut microbiome, and they were showing that it has an effect. And I was thinking, wow. So if that's true, what do we do to fix that problem?
Well, I think, stress is a big part, right? So early on in my career in Malibu as a physician, I had a venture capitalist guy who had Crohn's disease. And I tried every drug that was available on the market. And usually, if the drugs don't work that's in the pharmaceutical, world and pharmacies, I usually go to the clinical trials. So that's why I'm known for, because I always find a way with the new clinical trials, right? And when clinical trials didn't work on this guy, and we were not even thinking about fecal transplant at that point for Crohn's disease, I basically said, well, let's look at your lifestyle. I mean, you're super stressed with this, stocks, and you wake up at 4:00 in the morning and this. I'm like, maybe, and then I started thinking, maybe it's like, that faucet that's wide open, and you're trying to stop it, but it's wide open and the water keeps hemorrhaging, right? So maybe there's something going on that you're trying to shut down the acid in this kid, or you're trying to shut down the gut to slow down, but it keeps going, right? So I told him, just for the hell of it, why don't you change lifestyle? Why don't you do yoga, meditation, right? Well, anyways, I'm happy to report this patient has not seen me in 16 years, complete remission, okay? So something happened there. And by the way, he became a yoga instructor.
Wow.
Complete change of lifestyle. And then the other thing is I had a monitor who was a pre-med student, wanted to go to med school. And every time he would study for the MCAT, he would basically get rectal bleed, and he would see me for ulcerative colitis. And I would put him on treatment, that's part of the guidelines. And, inevitably, again, exam time. And then I told him, I'm like, you're a surfer guy, this is maybe too stressful for you. Maybe you may want to change path. Maybe your body cannot handle that, right? Because, you know, everybody wants to be something, but sometimes our capabilities are for something else, you know, like everybody would want to be a celebrity, but you know, you don't have the, or everybody wants to be a singer, but they don't have the voice. Well, God made us a certain way to have a certain job, right? So I think we're all given this task in the world to all be together, kind of like the microbiome, you know, Clostridiums are doing something, the ruminococcus are doing something, Bacillobacterium. Bacillobacterium doesn't wake up one morning and says, you know what, I'm going to do the job of the Bacteroides. You know, it's just doing their job, right? Kind of like the bees, and you know, you've got the queen bee and you've got all the other bees. So I think we all have to look at the microbiome and all these microbes and what are they doing, because it's really a great lesson for us as humans, because we are the reservoir for these microbes. We think that we know. We think that we are happy or depressed, but really it's our microbes that are dictating how you are. And we're going to come to show the data when we show our paper on anxiety, you know, the microbiome that's dysbiosed in anxiety, the microbiome that's dysbiosed in bipolar patients, potentially. You know, we've not touched bipolarism yet, but we've definitely touched anxiety. We've looked at COVID. Severe COVID patients had 0 bifidobacteria, 0 Bacillobacterium prausnitzii, and high Bacteroides and low diversity. Maybe that's the fingerprint that starts the thought process to say, okay, well, severe COVID patients have that dysbiosis. Let's look at what other patients have with Lyme disease. Let's look at Parkinson's. Let's look at Crohn's. Let's start with these formulas to kind of understand the microbiome. And obviously it's more complicating than, you know, Bacteroides elevated, bifido, et cetera, because when you start looking at the microbiome, it's not only, you know, these microbes, but it's also the microbes of different regions. Different regions on the planet have different microbes. So if you come from Africa to America and you're used to a certain diet in Africa and a certain microbiome in Africa, and you come to America where they're basically putting pesticides on all their vegetables and all the soil is denuded and the cows are injected with vaccines and antibiotics, you're going to start ingesting foods that are not so diverse. And you're going to start killing your microbiome, and then you're going to start increasing your potentially obesity, and you're going to start potentially having a kid that has autism, or you're having Parkinson's. Things change, right? Evolution is the process of microbes, really, in my opinion, that are changing, that are adapting. So adaptation, you know, is exactly that. And it's so funny because my sister was quoting Darwin yesterday, and I said, well, how do we know Darwin is right? Do we have to follow? Let's just look at another way, because listen, there's been the Big Bang Theory. Those are just theories, right? The beginning of life. Those are just theories. There's a million opportunities, a million options out there, you know, that is the beginning of life, right? So I think we need to be more open-minded and less, oh my God, she's crazy. Oh my God, he's crazy.
Well, and that's the thing, is we have to accept so many things on faith, because you say, well, if that's true, how come we're not saying, like, where else do you see life come from nothing? 2 pieces of dirt rubbed together, and now you got life. Now you got a complex organism with microbiome and all these things. And so and I think part of that is for people to think that the gut microbiome can control your brain. And you know, I was just so interested when I started diving down this hole. I was thinking, man, this is absolutely insane. Some of the microbiome, how it can affect your actual brain function and cravings and food. And you know, so I'm thinking, what does candida do if it's sitting there? If you're diabetic and you have a ton of candida in your gut, and then I've seen evidence with some of the like autism and some of the
Yes.
attention deficit disorder, you think, oh my goodness, is it just that sugar that you're eating that's, you know, if you just inject that without going through your gut, is that going to have as much of an effect, right?
Yeah, and yet there are some people that are healthy eating that sugar, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why the whole, you know, putting everybody in the same box is just wrong, because we're so different, right? So if I eat beans forget it. I mean, like, I'm bloated, I'm distended. There's no way lima beans or beans are touching my gut because my microbiome just doesn't want it, right? So, but you know, you look at Mexicans that are eating beans, and that's they're adapted to that, right? So that was a good lesson for me to learn as a gastroenterologist for practicing all these years. You see people that come in from Japan and then they start eating Mexican food and they change their diet. And then all of a sudden they're bloated, they're having gas problems, digestive issues. That's the first clue. You're changing your microbiome, right? Your microbiome is of this culture, of these foods, and now you're changing it and you're getting it these foods that it's not recognizing, right? And we've learned that from doing fecal transplant. I'll tell you, for me, the biggest shocking and the why I stepped into this, and it's an expensive, you know, my husband says I have expensive taste because I play with poop. You know, every stool sample is like $1,500. Every cartridge is like 10,000, 5,000 to 10,000. So I'm always like spending money, like my credit cards, like most women spend on Gucci, Prada, I'm spending on like reagents to analyze shit, okay? Let's be real. So, but you know, it is like Christmas. Why did I do that? Because I had a patient that when I did fecal transplant on him for C. diff, he remembered his daughter's date of birth after 6 months of fecal transplant. And he started coming back. And the wife said, oh my God, he's happier than, this guy was depressed. He used to be a golfer. And then he got C. diff. And then he got COPD and he had all these problems. And then he became super depressed and stopped remembering, and like he couldn't remember anything. And I did fecal transplant on him. I had tried to put him on a clinical trial for Alzheimer's, and he failed because he was too severe. And I did a mini mental status on the guy at the time. He was too severe. His mini mental status was like 21. So lo and behold, when I did fecal transplant for him after trying all the meds and the clinical trials for C. diff, I said, you know what, I'm going to do fecal transplant. And I used his wife, who was bubbly, happy, sharp, as the donor. And I figured, you know, they've lived for 40 years together, perfect donor. They share microbes to begin with. And so 6 months later, he came in and he corrected me during a history taking. And I said, wait a minute, you're correcting me? Usually I'm asking you twice. And he started laughing. And the wife said to me, yeah, you know, he's been much happier. He remembers things now. He's golfing again. And that's when I basically said something changed in the microbiome. I did a mini mental status on this guy. And I called the neurologist and I said, have you noticed anything change? He's like, yeah, you went from 21 to 26 to 29. So mini mental status, if you remember, is up to 30. He went from 21 to 29.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So after a big hiatus from my research, because I had to raise my 2 girls, 20 years without doing research, because I was doing research at University of Florida. That's how I got into GI. And after a big hiatus, I decided, you know what, I'm going to publish my first paper. My first paper was actually finding an ectopic stomach in the intestines of a young girl and who had abdominal pain. I was really thinking outside the box, putting a scope in the OR, having the surgeon push my scope all the way to the lesion, untwisting the intussusception, and finding an ectopic stomach. And that was the first case. So I published that case as thinking outside the box and discovering an ectopic stomach in the small bowel of a young girl. And I didn't have to do like a zipper surgery for them to like open it. I just like followed it, showed him the point of the intussusception. They went in by laparoscopy, they cut that section, sucked it out, and that was the most beautiful case ever. The girl's a model, so it was beautiful. She didn't have to have the zipper. She's looking great. So this was the first case. The second case was my Alzheimer's patient remembering his daughter's date of birth after six months of fecal transplant. So that case was really the beginning for me, because I was at a time in my life where, you know, you're about to become an empty nester. Your kid's grown, she's gone to college, you know, and so you basically go, okay, well, I need to go back to my research, right? And so I had a choice. It was either continuing the clinical trials with pharma or exploring this route which was expensive because I had to open a genetic sequencing lab. I had to start writing protocols, etc. And I said to myself, what if I'm that patient with Alzheimer's at 70 years old? And I'm gonna always say I coulda, shoulda, woulda. And I hate saying I coulda, shoulda, woulda. So I just jumped and I said, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. And then little by little, I'm still standing, I'm still doing trials. And I think when COVID hit, I was already seeing a bunch of stool samples. So I was getting an idea of what the microbiome looked like in different places, different regions, from Amazon jungle to Africa to civilized to, Amish country. So I had already seen these stool samples. And so when COVID hit, I said, I bet you it's in the stools. And then I started looking in the stools, we found it. And then when we found it, I said, I bet you there's something in the microbiome and that it's not about the strain of the virus, but really the microbiome, right? And so the microbiome became, how I started speaking because I started seeing the microbiome, and who better than me with, all these stool samples having analyzed. And I'm also doing, I started the Malibu microbiome meeting for doctors to educate them on the microbiome because I joined on my path all these doctors that do fecal transplant. And I invite any doctor that's doing fecal transplant to join our biome squad because that's how we learn from each other. Sahil Khanna talked about chronic urinary tract infections improving with fecal transplant. Dr. Colleen Kelly showed 2 cases of alopecia areata. Dr. Tom Barodi talked about Parkinson's with fecal transplant. So many doctors, Alex Kurutz, who owns a stool bank, talked about the regulatory of stool bank, the difficulty of creating stool banks, and the quality of maintaining a stool bank. That's why I love his products because, first of all, he's a physician with ethical, he's ethical. So I know that if I use his products, he's watched it because he has the conscience. I'll tell you the one thing that impressed me with him was he said, well, I see this shit, but I'm not sold on it yet. I'm doing it, but I'm not sold on it. I'm like, I realize it because I'm the same. And that's probably why, when I started Progenibiome, I didn't want to go like all these other labs, Biome, Ubiome, and all that to sell these consumer products because I said, I don't know what I'm seeing. What am I selling? And I think you could agree when you see these tests, you're like Bacteroides, what does that mean? Right? Yeah. What does it mean? Coprococcus comi, right? What is that? What was Faecalibacterium prausnitzii? What is Collencella? What is Streptomyces? All these bugs. So little by little, they start making sense, right? You start seeing them and you're like, you know what? I remember seeing this bug in residency. Maybe that's the pathogen, right? And then E. coli, there's E. coli in everyone, but too much E. coli is not necessarily a good thing, right? Too much Klebsiella is not a good thing. Too much H. influenza. So when you start seeing all these bacteria, it's really fascinating because the picture starts taking life. And then you can use the lab to then see if those bacteria are reproducing themselves. In other words, are they dead in the gut or are they alive, right? And then you start giving products, medications, vitamins, nutrients, probiotics, and you see what those nutrients are doing. That's the beauty of a validated, verified, reproducible assay.
And then the next time someone with that problem comes, you say, hey, let's try this combination. This is what worked before. And then
exactly.
you can make this
also
combination.
You have a picture. You have a picture that says, look, your microbiome's improving. You're no longer in the dark saying, here, take this probiotic and then see me in 6 months. You have something that can guide you. When I published successful implantation from fecal transplant, I showed the power of the assay, which is basically seeing a patient that has a Shannon index of 1.2, no diversity, given a donor, which is a transplanted a donor that had a diversity of 6.7, and then the donor goes up to 6 points. The recipient matches the donor. That's implantation. And then when you do, some fancy graphics, you see exactly that the patient starting to match, and of course it matches his resolution of symptoms.
Yeah, and I've seen your work, and I've seen your work with autism
Crohn's,
and
yeah,
moms and Crohn's, and there's so much you're doing, and COVID, I mean, it is absolutely astounding. Give people a little background. You were doing a couple studies on COVID outcomes.
Yes, so when COVID hit, I'm like, I have a genetic lab. I have a clinical research organization where we put drugs for pharma. We've done at least probably 300 clinical trials for pharma. So, and I have a portal with the FDA to do fecal transplant, because every time I need to do fecal transplant, I need to go through the portal of the FDA. So I said to myself, okay, well, here I have a portal. Here I have a CRO where I have coordinators. I have access to monitors. I have access to quality personnel. And I also have a genetic sequencing lab that's going to look for COVID, but not only are we going to look for COVID, we're going to also look at the microbiome and see, and also look at COVID in the stools, but see if we eradicate COVID with whatever treatment we're giving, right? That was my focus. My focus was, what is the microbiome doing during COVID? What is the treatment? And if the treatment eradicates the virus, that was my whole focus. So I started looking at all the protocols, like probably you did. Where do you go to look at protocols? Clinicaltrials.gov. Nothing was there when I was looking, because we were still in Japan. We were still in China when I started looking. It was January.
And there was nothing there.
There was nothing there. January 2020, COVID started. Me and Dr. Brody started paying attention, because I had the Malibu microbiome meeting in March, and all these doctors were coming from everywhere. And it's so funny, because I swear it's like, I felt back then, I'm like, maybe God is trying to tell me something about the microbiome to just hold off till I see more, right? So that microbiome meeting was just held off because of the pandemic, and we were shut down and nobody could move and we were quarantined. But we had looked, and I paid attention to a couple of studies. One of them was the study of Dr. Didier Raoult, which became very controversial. And I said to myself, my God, first of all, I looked at that study. The one thing that impressed me is, here's a guy, because remember, we were all scared at the beginning, right? Oh my God, we're going to go die in the front line, right? Mm-hmm. So I read that paper, and it was when he did 25 patients initially. And I'm like, wait, this doctor took care of 25 patients, and he did nasal PCR testing on 25 patients on a daily basis, like every day. Like here, I was afraid to even put a swab in a patient, and he's doing it every day to show, resolution of the PCR. And so that was the first thing. I'm like, he hasn't gotten COVID. He's not dead. What's going on there? He must be doing something, right? So that was the first thing that was the first paper. And he gave me courage to step into the front line to take care of patients. So I started looking at his protocol, and I said, well, you know what? Maybe hydroxychloroquine is doing something to the virus. Maybe Z-Pak is doing something. And I then looked at data from Italy with vitamin C that was doing something. And I knew about vitamin D, because vitamin D is is very important in the gut microbiome. And I also knew what vitamin C and vitamin D were doing on the microbiome, just from me having been testing my stools before and after vitamin C and vitamin D. So I said to myself, I'm going to put a protocol together. I'm going to write the protocol. We wrote the protocol March 13th. We submitted it to the FDA. We got approved April 3rd on hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, vitamin C, D, and zinc. And I posted it on clinical trials on April 3rd to sign the alarm. Hey guys, this is what I believe. Full transparency works. So of course, at the same time that I was getting ready for the IRB, patients were coming to me. So I was treating. My first patient was the father of a girlfriend of mine who is diabetic, COPD, had a bypass surgery, and basically had COVID.
Train wreck.
She calls me, she's
wreck.
Like, he doesn't want to go to the hospital. His oxygen is dropping. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, well, let's give him some Z-Pak. That's safe enough, right? And then I said, you know what? Have him lick the hydroxychloroquine, right? Because I didn't know, the protocol's not approved. So she did, and she's like, it's cutting down his cough. It's like improving him. So I said, well, you know what? Then continue my protocol. And then at the same time, I worked with a pharmacist in Beverly Hills, and I said, Jeff, from Making Fine, I said, Jeff, I need you to make me these vitamins because I need to start a protocol on hydroxy, Z-Pak, vitamin C and D and zinc. So he basically created these vitamins, the zinc D, which you'll see like on the website. And lo and behold, so I called them biome boosters as, you know, fun name for it. And what was so funny is I didn't really, you know, I mean, I just was ready to do my protocol. So I did 2 protocols that I wrote. One was the hydroxy, Z-Pak, vitamin C, D, and zinc. And I told Dr. Barodi, and I said, I'm calling it the Haze D-Pak. He goes, well, that's fortuitous. And then the other one was hydroxychloroquine, vitamin C, D, and zinc to protect the healthcare workers. Because I said to myself, well, back then we didn't have masks. We didn't have, I'm like, well, that's probably what Dr. Raoul is doing. So instead of giving it once a week, I'm going to give it once every 3 months because the half-life is 29 days, right? So my protocol was basically 1 hydroxychloroquine and then my vitamins.
So this was preventive.
Preventive. So I had a preventive clinical trial and then I had a treatment clinical trial. Now, you know, these clinical trials are super expensive to do. We couldn't, all of a sudden, so I'm fighting with the IRB to get it approved. The IRB says, all of a sudden when we get approved, the IRB says, Dr. Hazan, you're ready to go. That was on a Friday. On Saturday night, there's a tweet with Dr. Sabine Hazan and Progenibiome. And the tweet goes, Dr. Hazan is doing horrible clinical trials, open label on 600 patients. We need to do placebo-controlled trials. This is an outrage to research. So the tweet goes 77 times by a guy that's a public health guy at Oxford University, okay? 77 times. I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna even pay attention to the tweet. All of a sudden, on Monday, the FDA says, Dr. Hazan, you're on hold for the clinical trial. I'm like, I'm on hold? Why? You have to do a placebo-controlled trial. A placebo in the middle of a pandemic, I said. And that's what I had a big problem with. And that's when I started becoming, you know, that tweet, I didn't even comment. I was like very shy, timid, afraid. I was like, well, watch me, watch the data. Let's see the data, right? Open label, you know, at least let's see the open label. Let's treat as many as we can, turn off the fire, and then ask what, you know, pill did we use to turn off the fire? But don't basically leave a fire going and just watch it. So that's what the pandemic was. So when that happened and I was put on hold, the IRB said, I'm sorry, Dr. Hazan, we can't do your clinical trial. It's too controversial. So I had to pick another and scramble and pick another IRB. The FDA was kind enough to take my suggestion to say vitamins. So it became non-placebo. It wasn't a placebo like a sugar pill. It was vitamins versus hydroxy Z-Pak with the vitamins, right? So it became like a vitamin protocol. So it was prophylaxis. So all of a sudden, as we're ready to go and the IRB has approved us and we're ready to go, political Trump is talking about hydroxychloroquine. And all of a sudden, Dr. Hazan cannot recruit any patients. All the patients are like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. You're giving me, we got phone calls. You're a murderer, you're killing us, you're killing patients. I'm like, I'm killing patients with a hydroxychloroquine, a drug from 1929? Are you kidding me?
Which we use
for arthritis, for everyone.
For all kinds of autoimmune diseases, and people are on it forever. No one said a word about it till now all of a sudden became an issue.
Exactly. And then, so then the next protocol that Dr. Brody came out, because Dr. Brody was more about ivermectin doxycycline, which we called Zyverdox. So Dr. Brody said, Sabine, let's focus on Zyverdox. So I said, okay, I'm going to put aside those 2 protocols that I worked hard on it. Although I did recruit 300 physicians that were following, that are not vaccinated, you know, so we're following them. So these people are on my trial. So we need to keep following them, right? To see, like, they're the control group essentially, right? So then we started with the ivermectin doxycycline protocol, and ivermectin doxycycline, as you've seen, ivermectin became a, you know, horse paste. Fermented bacteria is now a horse paste. And so they killed it.
Which we use for treating river blindness, and we've used for parasites in Guatemala, all around the world. Yes.
And that's when little by little, my fury that you've seen on Twitter is like, at Merck, ivermectin not safe for dying patients, but safe for babies with scabies? Because we did a clinical trial. In fact, my sister's the one that brought ivermectin to the market with pharmaceutical. I forgot who the company was, but she brought it to market, and basically for scabies and lice. So ivermectin was given for babies for the longest time, and all of a sudden for COVID patients,
still is indicated.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of the top, World Health Organization drugs. So here we are, being controversial, being loud, and I decided, well, I'm going to start showing the microbiome because that's my field, that's the new frontier. And pharma is heading into the microbiome world, whether they like it or not, they are. I'm seeing it. You have companies fighting with each other at the next pill poop, right? So, and there's a need for those products if they're properly done and properly tested and proper quality. But if we're stepping into a microbiome space, I felt that it was my job to start understanding these microbes a little bit better, because people need to understand that if you're giving, if you have C. diff, and I'm giving you a pill poop of someone that has C. diff, but then that person is suicidal or is bald, they need to know to make the judgment, right? They need to have, I believe in transparency. And if we're getting into a world of fecal capsules, people need to know who's my donor, right? It can't just be a melting pot.
As we discussed already, you get their cravings, you get their, maybe their depression. Maybe.
Are they suicidal?
Yeah, exactly.
Did they have colon cancer? I mean, you want to know these things, right? So, because then you're swapping one thing. And that's why all of us, you'll talk to Neil Stolman, who, is actually the physician who guided me in this world 25 years ago when I was a fellow at University of Florida. And he said, the future isn't shit. And I said, please don't make me play with it. And here I am deep, deep into it. You don't understand, like if there's one thing that I do not like is poop. I mean, like I'm a clean, sterile, but guess what? That mentality of clean, sterile was probably not the right mentality. So I stepped into it. Now I'm over it. I mean, like I stepped into looking for COVID in the stools. I was scared at the beginning. Now I'm like, I'm over it.
When you see you can help people and that you can contribute to the world, you say, okay, it's worth it now, right?
This is what happens. You step into it and then you see miracles, and the miracles take over. You don't look at poop the same way anymore. You look at poop as powerful. And so, it becomes more important to look at. So that's my story in a nutshell.
But during this, so you started looking at the microbiome, but you would notice like certain people with lacking certain microbiome would be more susceptible. And, just to tie into what I was looking at on this end, not even thinking about microbiome at that point, was, okay, we know that people who are dying in the hospital were obese, diabetic, metabolically sick, and that was, and elderly. And then now you're showing data saying, hey, here's what else changes as you get older, or you get metabolically sick. And it wasn't necessarily age, it was metabolically sick people. So
of bifidobacteria.
And with high insulin, and that's what I'm really interested in. And so you started looking and saying, if it's really low, you're in trouble. If it's higher, you're okay. It looks like, right?
So bifidobacteria, which is the bacteria that's in all these probiotics, like you read it on the label. There's some great data out there that actually looked at all these probiotics. There's one paper in particular looked at 17 probiotics, and 16 out of the 17 didn't even have the probiotic that's on the label. So in other words, it's fake. It's carrots. It's dehydrated stuff, okay? But it doesn't have bifidobacteria. Now, what's interesting is the 1 out of 17 that had it, one wonders, was it a dead bacteria or an alive bacteria, right? And then I'll take it to the next level. Is the capsule that contains that probiotic, is that toxic to your microbiome, right? So there's so many caveats to all why these pills may not work for your gut, and what is it doing to your gut is the most important question, right? So, and then the other thing is, what are medications? What is alcohol doing? We know 1 glass of red wine improves the microbiome. 1 little shot of tequila improves the microbiome. the bifidobacteria. But what is, you know, a whole bottle doing? You know, are you sterilizing your whole gut? And then where are you going to get all those microbes? You're not eating dirt every day, right? And is the dirt that you're eating the right dirt, or are you eating parasite, a dirt that has an overgrowth of parasites? You know, so there's microbes in everything. You know, what's interesting is when I first started looking at the species, and I don't know if you'll remember this bug, but Yersinia pestis. Remember Yersinia pestis?
Yeah.
So I found it in patients in their microbiome, in their signature. Now it's basically sequestered, right? It's like it's suffocated with all these other microbes. But the fact is, there is a fingerprint of Yersinia pestis in some patients. So are those patients, when they become, you know, out of balance, are they potential spreaders of the bubonic plague in the future? You know, I mean, this is real. So I think the onus, when I saw that, to me, I said to myself, well, it makes sense that they probably passed it on from generations to generations. Maybe the original microbiome had all these microbes, you know, including Yersinia pestis. But then as we destroy little by little, we just leave one to flourish, kind of with C. diff. What is C. diff? Clostridium difficile is basically a bacteria that's left on its own because the diversity is killed from all these antibiotics, right? So if you look at patients with C. diff, their diversity is about 1.92, right? As opposed to about 5, 6, okay? So if I'm killing the diversity, when we give vancomycin, we keep killing. When we give flagyl, we keep killing. So are we basically keep on killing, and therefore the diversity is gone, and then C. diff is left by itself to flourish? So
yeah, and that's the question, is like, what can we do if say now, if you see someone who's at risk of dying of COVID, you know, and there's a metabolic sick, what steps do we take to say, hey, let's improve your chance of the best? From our standpoint, is saying, okay, let's cut out the processed food, let's eat real food, let's get the stress under control, let's get the sleep, let's add in some zinc, vitamin D3, and all these things that we, based on our research, this is not just people making stuff up. You realize, could we have made a better, different? I mean, my question is, how many people could have? I have people now that 2 years ago would not have survived COVID if they got it. Now I'm looking at them going, you know, if you got it, you do all right. Like, we have a way better fighting chance. At least you're not too.
I think we've learned a lot, and we have also to our disposal a lot of medications, you know, and I'm not you know, we have definitely, you know, the Merck product, we've got the, you know, Paxlovid product. I mean, Paxlovid for the most part is doing fine. You know, I mean, it is not working as well that I've observed from vaccinated patients. I don't know what you've seen.
Well, there's a pretty famous one who took it twice outside of the guidelines, but no one really said anything.
Yeah.
But after being up to date on everything, yes.
So did that mess him up? Did that, you know, mess up his kidneys? Who knows? Was the fact that he was vaccinated with the same product from the same pharmaceutical company, was there, you know, an interaction between the treatment and the vaccine? I mean, you know, the problem is how these vaccines are like proprietary, so you don't really know what's in there. You know, have these drugs, they're proprietary, you don't know what's in there. And this is what the future that I'd like to see is more transparency. Part of the reason that I started my protocols at the beginning with hydroxy and ivermectin and doxy and Z-Pak is basically to give transparency to people. Like, we know ivermectin is safe. We know doxycycline is safe because we've given it to kids with acne for up to a year. If we combine them together, it's safe. We don't see any, you know, interactions. We add a vitamin C and vitamin D and zinc to the protocol. Maybe that's the answer, right? And for the most part, I think we're better prepared as physicians. I think, you know, for those of us who are starting to see the truth, right? That are starting to say, you know what, I'm here stuck with my patient. I can no longer listen to the media. I can no longer listen to what the politicians are saying. I've got to be the doctor. That's why I got the oath, right?
Well, and that's the, you know, that opens up a can of worms, right? So a lot of us, I think you're of the same mindset as me, is that, you know, we observed, you sit back, and I remember at the beginning of this thinking, are we all going to die from this? Is this going to be a big deal? Is this, you know, what's the mortality rate? We had no idea, and it was exaggerated. And so you look and like, uh-oh, I'm not going to err on the side of being cavalier and saying, oh, don't worry, everyone, it's fine. And it's like, we didn't know. So you sat back, and then I watched people like Pierre Corey coming on, like crying, giving testimony, saying, look, this is what I'm doing, and it's working.
Right.
We have to do this. It's working. And then, my patients aren't going on the vent. They're not dying by high dose steroids. Now,
right.
They thought he was crazy at the time, but then that became the standard of care. They go, oh, it is working. But how many people die until you say, hey, we trust this guy who's been around medicine as decorated doc? And then you have Peter McCullough coming out saying, here's what I'm seeing and here's what you're seeing. And so what we've done is stifled debate. There's AB 2098. I don't know if you saw that in California.
Yes, in California. Oh my God.
They say, hey, if you question stuff, like, how did we get advances in medicine? There's no way to advance unless you say, hey, this isn't working. I have everyone on this diet and they're all dying. Maybe we got to, even though that's a standard of care, it's wrong. And we have to change that. So someone has to come in to change it, but you can't say we're going to take your license if you question what we're doing, even though it's not working. It doesn't make sense.
Right. And why is one group of people like the naturopaths doing what they're doing and we're not allowed, right? Why are we not allowed to step into the world of natural medicine, functional medicine? I think this is the future where it's going. I think physicians have had enough. I mean, I certainly have. I've been practicing GI for 25, 30 years almost, and I've been doing research for almost 2 decades. I think at some point you want to reach a cure. You don't want to just say, oh, well, we cured H. pylori and we cured hepatitis C. I mean, I'd love to cure Crohn's disease. I'd love to see, kids with autism improve and start speaking. I'd love to see Parkinson's improving. I put myself in the place of the patient. And what if I'm the patient? So nobody's going to listen to me? What if I'm the patient and I want to take my daughter's poop and eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Who's going to stop me? So if I'm going to a doctor to guide me and that doctor doesn't want to guide me because he thinks I'm like crazy listening to another doctor, but really it's my job. It's, they've not offered anything else. You look at Alzheimer's, you look at Parkinson's, we've not advanced those fields, we need something to advance these fields.
And we're approving meds that don't work, and you look at it and go, wait a minute, all the advisors say it doesn't work, and then you approve it and think, wait a minute, that's not very good,
Right.
And then looking at this from a perspective that where we have a shared perspective is, as a matter of fact, my niece has autism, right? And she she was doing terribly, and she was obese, and she had all kinds of health problems. So my sister-in-law asked me, what would you do? I'm like, well, there's a movie called The Magic Pill. You may want to watch that. And basically they were talking about dietary changes helping with some of these things. And guess what? She got remarkably better. She lost weight. She became happy. Amazing. She's laughing. She had emotions. And I'm thinking, gosh, if we can fix the dietary, what you're putting in, and then have you say, okay, here's what we're going to do with the gut microbiome to work on. We'll attack it from all fronts we can until our patient gets better. Right.
And what I encourage people is like when they have those things that are trying to check, because those are the cases that are exciting to me, because it's like you started with autism and now you're improved. What changed in the microbiome? Reach out to us to kind of like, and that's what I want to work on, to see what changed in the microbiome, because that gives you a clue of which microbe could be affecting autism. Because I believe it's a microbe, and it may not be just one, it may be multiple microbes.
And you want to replace it and you don't want to kill it off. So, things we do know, like we've talked about a lot, is get the stress right. Don't eat terrible food that's going to be, full of chemicals that are going to kill your microbiome, glyphosate and all these other things. And then you say, okay, how do I nourish our fermented foods the way to go? Is it kimchi? Is it for certain populations, certain people it helps, some people it doesn't?
And I think, listen, there's a couple things we know. You exercise, you feel good, you look at the data, you start fasting, intermittent fasting, people feel good, they lose weight, right? And what is it doing at the microbiome level? It actually increases bifidobacteria. So intermittent fasting improves your bifidobacteria. So you don't have to take a probiotic, you just have to do intermittent fasting to increase it, right?
Yeah, that's the thing is like, and for us, we're looking at like saying, oh, intermittent fasting works by lowering insulin, which it does. So maybe lowering insulin and cortisol is going to make the gut microbiome be that much healthier. There's a interaction there.
And it gets you back onto the microbes, right? The microbes are ruling. So in other words, high BIF, is probably better for you. I'm publishing my case throughout the pandemic because I've been 2.5 years now on the pandemic, and I analyze my stools on a regular basis. So, I've seen my BIF up, down, and it's interesting what I've learned along the way. So that data is going to be coming. But bifidobacteria to me is something we're going to be needing to pay attention in the future. And I think people are going to start paying attention to their nutrition a little bit more. And also vitamin D levels. We know that patients with vitamin D level above 50 do better with COVID. They survive better. They tolerate the virus a little bit better. Less long haulers in people with vitamin D deficiencies. So definitely vitamin D has a role in the microbiome. It's a nutrient for the microbiome. Vitamin C has a role in the microbiome. So I think, we need to step into that. And I think the microbiome is just another way to look. It's what we used to do with CBC, right? When you had hemoglobin was low, you knew that the hemoglobin was low and that patient needed a transfusion, right? But before that, they were just, transfusing people, just because they thought they were anemic, right? They didn't have those tools. Now we have that technology, we have those tools. We need to step into it, and we got to stop the destruction of microbes, in my opinion. We got to see what's killing these microbes. Yes, you can kill, if you've got too much, you've got to kill, right? So in other words, hydroxychloroquine kills your microbiome, kills the virus at a time that the virus is killing you to begin with. So you're going to use that, right? That's my train of thought anyways, right? Ivermectin.
You gotta survive the acute insult, and then you worry about everything else.
That's it. Right? So, you kill off the virus that's about to kill you, and then you replenish, right? But the first thing is like, there's an emergency where you have a patient with anaphylactic reaction. So you want to talk about Pierre Corey. My realization with ivermectin was when I had a patient whose oxygen dropped and he didn't want to go to the hospital. He was crashing 63%. And my instinct was to tell him to take 36 milligrams of ivermectin. And back then I was scared. Like Dr. Barodi will tell you, when we wrote the protocol, we wrote it with 12 milligrams of ivermectin and doxycycline 100 milligrams twice a day, right? And it was day 1, day 3, day 5. And Dr. Barodi's like, no, we need to go higher. I'm like, no, let's not go higher. I was scared of it, right? And then when that patient dropped his 63, I'm like, you know what, just take the whole thing, not 12 milligrams, just take the whole thing. And he started going up from 63, up in the 70s, into the 80s. And I asked myself, what happened there? What went on that is, his oxygen went up. And that's when the realization for me was that, ivermectin is a fermented product of a bacteria from the same phylum as bifidobacteria. So my whole process was, which by the way, I'm publishing that paper, it's coming out. It was approved, the hypothetical. Obviously, if it's a hypothesis, it's because I've done the research. There is the research coming up. But the bottom line is, and I showed it in Brazil at a lecture, the bottom line is, what is ivermectin? It's the same bug, the fermented product of a bug that's similar to bifidobacteria. So what are we doing when we're giving it? Could it be that we're increasing the bifidobacteria at the time of the cytokine storm? Could it be that the bifidobacteria is sucking those cytokines from your gut, releasing them into the toilet, and therefore your cytokines from your lungs go into the circulation, back to the gut. Now you've decreased your cytokines in the lungs and you're breathing again. That feeling that people have when they get ivermectin is that feeling of like, oh my God, it's like a chest tube and they're breathing, right? You're getting them oxygen. So Pierre Corey noticed that on the front line. I noticed it on the front line. My patients noticed it.
And crazy enough, as you two are looking at that, I'm looking at like the difference between visceral fat, subcutaneous fat, trying to figure out why is it that the morbidly obese and diabetics are dying? And then you look, and then there's something called TRIT-BR2, and they find in mice, if they block that enzyme, which only comes from visceral fat, not subcutaneous fat, they don't get the cytokine storm. You think, oh, maybe we got to work on the visceral fat and metabolic health, and that will decrease
100%,
our, right?
100%. And by the way, obese people have low bifidobacteria. So FYI.
Exactly. These all tie together. That's what I'm saying. It's all one system that we're tying all this together. When you look from different perspectives, I'm looking at the insulin and the visceral fat, but if you decrease that, the bifidobacterium. And I have one question for you, because I don't want to keep you all day. I love talking to you.
I know, me too.
In Martha Carlin, I was talking to her this morning, and she does a product called Sugarship. I don't know if you're familiar.
No.
But we were talking about bifidobacterium, and it just came up in conversation. She said, I think she said carnivore or high fat diet can have a decrease in bifidobacterium. Is that?
We're coming out with that data. I have a young intern that's looking at vegan, vegetarian, and carnivore.
Oh my gosh. So you're going to solve the diet wars.
Transplants.
So in your case now, do you say, hey, if I were to do it, well, and it may depend on where you are metabolically, but would you say like just balancing your diet out, getting rid of processed stuff?
I would do, honestly, if I were to lose weight, which I need to lose weight because I've gained so much on this pandemic because I'm stressed.
Yeah, stress does it. There's no fact that stress is a factor, and we're going to find it has the effect on this microbiome and stress hormones and all that.
Yeah. And when I'm stressed, I crave pizza, which is probably the worst thing I could be eating. So, especially for my microbiome, because I'm from Morocco, so I should be eating couscous and all that. So, but the fact is, yes, so we have to look at our microbiome, and we have to, that's all the data that's going to be coming out.
All right, I'll be watching it. And also fasting improves it makes more diversity of the
bifidobacteria. There's actually a great paper that just came out that shows that intermittent fasting improves the bifidobacteria. So intermittent fasting is a great thing. Now, other things that I can tell you, is, a lot of coffee. 1 cup of coffee is good. A lot of coffee is probably not a good idea. Vitamin D is important. Vitamin C is important. Exercising, decreasing stress. That's that's gut health. And then fermented foods, is improving.
Amazing. Hey, thanks so much.
Those are the key things.
Before you escape, I have to ask you, this is called life's best medicine. So what's life's best medicine for you? Where do you go when you're stressed, tense? What do you do? Like, what gives you purpose and meaning? And I know you're passionate, so it's a dumb question probably, but what drives you? So
I love my job. I mean, I was in Zimbabwe. I mean, I love my job when I'm doing fun things and evaluating microbes and, and seeing improvement of a disease in a patient. And to me, that's like what thrills me. That's so empowering. And having lost no one on the pandemic. I mean, let's talk about that. I've lost no one. Here I am doing 3 placebo-controlled trials where the placebo group should have died, right? And I didn't let them die. I treated them off-label. And even at the worst, with oxygens in the 80s, I treated at home and no one died. So that's really empowering to me because it's something that tells me, you know what? I'm okay. I've got this, right?
Yeah,
and so,
yeah.
And also it's something that basically says, you know what, at some point, whoever is creating this is going to need a doctor for their own health, right? So in other words, don't kill the science. If the science can help you, it's not a good idea. And, so for me, what do I do? So what stresses me is having to deal with the regulatory. What stresses me is obviously, the noise, because when I see something in the media that basically says, oh, I just saw like a tweet today about, Pfizer and like, if you're treating or if you're talking about some other treatment, you're basically not a scientist. You're not following something ridiculous, like you're blind or you're not seeing or something. And those things annoy me. Yeah, the cat with the glasses, that was just so annoying because it's like, you know what, Pfizer, you have your idea, you have your hypothesis. Dr. Sabine Hazan has her hypothesis. You have your hypothesis. We're all scientists here trying to improve life and humanity. We should all come to the table together. In other words, Fauci should be coming to the table, McCullough, Pierre Corey, which by the way, kudos to those guys for speaking up. Kudos to them. Pierre Corey, at the beginning, when I reached out to him, I'm like, Pierre, we should start doing this and this. He goes, Sabine, we're at war. This is war. Do you not see that? And, at the beginning, I was like, nah, it's research, it's science. He just doesn't understand the process of FDA, regulatory, all that. And then somewhere along the line, when I got censored and my trials got, criticized, or not criticized, but like tried to be
Attacks,
stopped,
yeah.
to recruit and interfered with. That's the biggest thing, interference. When interference of research happened is basically when I realized this is war. We're at war on two different platforms. We're at war with an invisible organism, a virus, and we're at war with the corruption that is only seeing money and not seeing the big picture, that humanity might go extinct if we keep in this path, right? Because I'm seeing the microbiome, and I can assure you that from before COVID to now, after vaccination, after long haulers, after COVID not treated, the microbiome has changed. The microbiome is changing.
And obesity is going up, and metabolic diseases going up. All those things are this.
Yeah,
they're
and
hand
the
in hand.
microbiome is decreasing. It's depleting. We're losing more and more and more microbes. You kill off bifidobacteria from the planet. That's it. You know, individuals need good microbes to have that balance. If you keep killing, look at Africa. If you look at the phylum, I just came back. So what do? I love my job. I went to Zimbabwe to speak at a conference, and I took a safari and basically analyzed the microbiome of people in Africa that live in that jungle area, that bush. And then I took the microbiome of elephants that live in the bush, and they had 10 phylums of microbes in their guts, right? 8 to 10. Now, the human in a New York City or California has 3 to 4. We've lost 6 phylums, wipe out. How did we wipe them out? Well, what we're eating, what we're taking, what we're putting on our skins, all that. So it's important to start regaining those microbes, to regain those phylums. Otherwise, 4, 3, 2, 1, wipe out civilization, wipe out humanity. And that's a reality. Yes, it's deep. I've said that on Twitter. People are like, deep. I go, unfortunately, the microbiome existed before humans, and the microbiome will exist after humans. We're just a reservoir. So that alone keeps me at peace to know that, you know what, it doesn't matter. At the end, microbes will continue to go on. It is our interest, it is in our interest to take on this drive, this path to look at the microbiome, because that's how we're going to live longer. That's how we're going to be happier. That's how we're going to maintain this planet. You know, bifidobacteria has been associated with climate change. Bifidobacteria decomposes plastic. We need to look at all that. What are we doing to the planet? Maybe we're killing too much bifidobacteria. So bifidobacteria is an important bug. It makes me happy to know that, you know, there is a world of microbes where good stuff happens, and that it is in charge of humanity to a way. And then the other thing I do painting, I do fishing. I do, painting, and now I'm into like carving woods.
Awesome. Yeah, because your brain's always going. I could tell, like you're creative,
So
you're passionate.
and then I try to meditate, and I try to do yoga, but I'm too busy.
Meditate, yoga, then cuss at people on Twitter, then get back to yoga. Yeah, you got to have balance in life, right?
Okay, I'm fine. I'm going back.
No, but that's so true. But I think a lot of it, like when we're talking about the microbiome, I think it really does reflect on us that you have to be able to work with each other, realize what your area is, my area, and once you have one dominant that says this is the only way, and it kills off all the good microbiome, right? And you lose, we're going to pay as a society until we can have a reasonable discussion saying, oh, you see it this way, I see it that way. Let's have, like, how could it be 2 years into this, almost 3 years, that we haven't had a public forum where Fauci sits down, McCullough sits down, you come to the table, Pierre Corey, and all these people sit down and say, let's have a discussion. They never talk to each other. It's amazing.
And in the olden days, that's the way it used to be, right?
Grand rounds, like that's what I mean. When us, not us.
No, but I'm talking even in the 1800s, when the smallpox came, they all sat down as scientists. It was one scientist from Italy, one from France, and they all, like even Sanofi Pasteur, when these discoveries occurred, they all talked to each other. And that's what we did with the C19 group, with Peter McCullough, Pierre Corey, all those guys. We joined forces at the beginning of the pandemic as doctors on the front line, because we said, well, who else? I mean, Peter McCullough is extremely published, extremely respected physician. And I can assure you, there is no interest in his body about funding or money. He is about doing the right thing.
No, I'll tell you.
Corey, same thing. I mean, those guys have not gotten paid. You know, me and Peter McCullough used to talk at the beginning, and he'd be like, I'd be complaining about the fact that I'm spending $1,500 per stool samples. You know, that study on the lost microbes of COVID was $250,000 of my savings, right? And I'm complaining, and Peter's like, well, you know, I spent $3,000 to put all my publications on open access, because every time you submit a journal, you want to put it on open access. It's $3,000. So, and I've done the same thing. You know, we keep publishing, we keep doing the research. You know, to look at ivermectin before and after, that was costly. To look at vitamin C before and after, you know, all of that is expensive. But I think if anything, it gives I stand as a role model for people to do the right thing, to spend their money on their research, on their belief. You know, there was never, there was not an interest. To me, it's all about research. It's not, people have come up to me and said, oh, do you want to sell Progenobiome? And I'm like, Progenobiome was created for me to see, the Temple of Doom, right? Or to be Indiana Jones. It's not to be sold. Progenobiome was created to bring doctors to the table, like you, like Peter McCullough, like Pierre Corey, like to see something like Keith Berkowitz. I have these discussions. I'm working on Parkinson's with Keith Berkowitz, and we exchange ideas. And then I work with Dr. Bijan Porat in Beverly Hills, and we exchange ideas. And then Sheldon Jordan at UCLA and USC, top neurologist in the world. We exchange ideas. When I saw the elephant poop, I called him. I'm like, you won't believe this. The phylum of the elephant has 10 phylums. That's ridiculous. So, but they're not compatible with humans. So let's just get this straight before.
Yeah, so people aren't out eating elephant poop all weekend.
Let's not start animal poop in a capsule, because I can see it already.
Yeah.
Dr. Hazen talked about elephant poop. Let's go harvest the elephant poop and put it in a capsule and sell it as the next product. FDA approval, let's go. Come on.
Yeah, it's just craziness.
Things a little bit better.
But that's the thing is I sat back and watched people like you and all these other docs, and they sacrifice everything. Like, everything. Half of them lost their medical license, and they're the most published doctor. They know more than the people taking their license. I can guarantee you that. They're the world experts. And, even McCullough has like 56 studies on COVID, 700 and something public, and you look at it, it's like, holy cow, this guy, he's not just some person who wants a grandstand.
And he's so well spoken, and it's interesting because this pandemic showed, to me anyways, it showed me the righteous physicians, and those are the doctors I want to work with. So that's what it's all about.
I think we all see that in each other. You say, I want to help, I want to do the right thing. I don't want to be a pain in the butt. I don't want to get out and
it's not about money for us. Yeah. We didn't go into medicine. Look, if I wanted to make money from medicine, if I wanted to make money, I would have sold shampoos. Okay.
You would have went into politics.
No, I would have gone into politics or sold shampoos. I mean, listen, it's not that hard with my hair for me to sell shampoo. Here's the new shampoo, SH ... But the fact is, that's not who I am. I'm not a Kim Kardashian selling the new wave, or Madonna selling a mascara, or, I'm a physician that upholds my oath. That's what I took.
So therefore you'll be attacked.
Yeah, I'm going to say it like it is. And if some people don't like it, well, that's my hypothesis, right? I mean, we are scientists. How many drugs have failed? Vioxx, digoxin, how many drugs have failed that we thought, oh, this is the new treatment, digoxin for heart failure. How messed up have we been with ulcers all these years, thinking it was not a bacteria, and then the discovery that it was a bacteria. It's like, whoa, what happened? We've messed up in medicine because we don't know it all. We know 1%. In the
being a little bit more humble and say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And then we all kind of put our brains and go, oh, maybe it is this effect on this hormone that you're the expert on. It is. Right. That's what we have to get back to, really. And so I'll tell you, Peter McCullough was in town, and people kept bugging me to go meet him. And I thought, oh, I'm not going to some big fundraiser thing. I'm not into it. Then it turned out to be a little barbecue. And he said, hey, what are you seeing, and what's working for you? And like, he was so humble. I said, this guy's the real deal. There's zero doubt in my mind where he's coming from.
So humble. And he's, he flies all over the place. He doesn't get paid for it. He does expert witnessing. He doesn't get paid for it. He's so humble, and he's dedicated so many hours, so much time. And he's the perfect face for that. You know, I love talking to you, but I'm not the face that's going to go on the news. Are you kidding me? I mean, I'm going to be destroyed.
Yeah, I don't want to do any. I don't want to do any of that
No
stuff.
way.
Really,
I mean, like
no,
a
let him
woman
go
from
ahead, Peter. You're doing
Stockholm?
great.
No way, no way.
Yeah, we want to be doctors. We want to take care of our patients, and we want to not be told what to
And
do.
to
If it's
me,
working,
it's noise. It's like, I don't want people talking. I just leave me alone and make me do my research. I
well,
love
keep
talking
up the great, keep it up. I mean, you're doing great work, and you've inspired a lot of us. I read your book cover to cover,
good.
loved it, and so everyone go get the book. And also, Progenobiome, do you do stool samples for people? Can they just send them? How's that work? What do you do?
So Progenobiome is really research labs. So if there's long haulers, send them my way because we're looking at that. If there's people that got vaccine injured or believe they have vaccine injured, send them my way because we're looking at that. Autistic children with families, we're looking at that. So really, we're trying to get, stool samples, but it's really at the research level. And so we have a relationship with the parents, the patients to kind of look at it. It's not a consumer product yet. We hope probably once it's approved by the FDA, et cetera, to be a consumer product. But right now we're just tapping the surface and just writing the data as we see it. I like to believe that I'm kind of spearheading because I'm doing, over 50 clinical trials on the microbiome and disease. It's the only way to see it, right? You cannot just focus on Parkinson's and the microbiome. You have to look at what Parkinson's and the microbiome is doing, autism and the microbiome is doing, Alzheimer's, obesity. That's how I kind of zoned in on bifidobacteria for COVID, because COVID was attacking the overweight, the diabetics, the old people, and the cancer patients, right? Those were the high risk. What do those people have in common? They're low bifidobacteria. So I knew that by looking at that. I talked about it at the Malibu conference, and of course China listened in, and then they beat me to my study.
Of course, yeah, of course.
But to me, it's not about, I always talk about my research because I want others to do it first, because then it validates my work when I come out. It's not a competition. We're not in here for a competition.
So you're not the science.
I'm not interested in being, Dr. Hazan was the first one. I'm not interested in the first one. I'm interested in making sure it's true, it's real, it's reproducible. That's what I'm interested in. We're too busy I want to be the first one. I want to be the first one. But then you mess up when you're the first one. But if you wait, have you noticed I haven't published anything on my treatment from the FDA on hydroxy, Z-Pak, Ivermectin, doxycycline?
Did they reopen that where you can or no?
So no, I am doing them. I'm conducting those trials. I'm still conducting. We're trying to get funds because those research are really expensive. So we have a Microbiome Research Foundation. I encourage everyone to support us. It's on the Progenobiome because that's how we do research that nobody.
We'll put a link for sure so people can help, because I think it's so important.
Yeah, so this way it pays for kids that don't have the means to pay for stool assays for autism, Crohn's disease, people that don't have money. We put patients, so we try to get funds to pay for those patients. So we put patients on a database and then we start calling them. So if I'm doing the study on Parkinson's, for example, right now, I've got a whole bunch of numbers on Parkinson's. So I'm accumulating all my numbers. So there's a couple pipelines I want to do. I want to do the microbiome of the DNA. I want to look at the DNA. I want to look at the RNA. I want to look at the metabolites. So when I look at Parkinson's, so that I'm sure of what I'm looking, and then I'm going to collaborate with others that have worked on that, because to me, that just validates me, and collaboration is key. So I invite every doctor, any doctor, to collaborate with us. We are not charging anything to doctors to collaborate. We're really a research group of curious physicians on the microbiome to validate the microbiome research that's been done up to now, because unfortunately it's done on mice. It's done by scientists that don't touch patients. We need to validate that, if certain microbes are affected in diabetes, that it's really truly that. So
awesome. Yeah, we're waiting for all your science coming forward and everything you've done so far. And thank you for proving that, yes, this is in fact science, and this is exactly real, and that it does have real outcomes, and real patient lives are saved. And we can look at that and not just sit back helplessly. I think the biggest frustration for us doctors was we were told to sit down and do nothing. You turn to go to the ER, we didn't know. I mean, it was just so frustrating. And upsetting because, gosh, dang it, we have a patient in front of us.
Right. And the fact that you can't even tell your patients to take vitamins. I mean, you know, I was in Zimbabwe, and I'll finish with this. I was in Zimbabwe and I was talking about the fact that I lost no one, and I was showing the mechanism of action that I believe is ivermectin and all that. And at the end, there was another physician who basically, because we were talking in front of the Minister of Health, and the physician said, Minister of Health, I believe that we should outlaw all these drugs. Hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, doxycycline, ivermectin, vitamin C, vitamin D. And I'm like, oh my God, those are my protocols. Talk about like, but then I said, wait, vitamin C and vitamin D is a drug now? Oh, we should outlaw vitamin C and vitamin D? I mean, what about like, what are we gonna have scurvy now? You know, so that was something, this guy was obviously paid to speak.
Yeah, that's what it did. It took the blinders off. We can see who's paid. We know who's paid and who's not. Who's getting it. We know it.
To create chaos, to create division, to create, you know, distractions. And then the other trick that they have is like, oh my God, these doctors, they're making money. You know, first of all, a lot of doctors on the front line. There's a doctor, Ben Marble in Florida. He's taking care of like 150,000 patients for free. You know, so he's assembled a group of about 30, 40 physicians that are, you know, working around the clock for free to take care of these patients. So, you know, I think we need to, you know, why do we go to medical school if we are not allowed to practice the art of medicine?
Yeah, that's going to be the question. It's going to be a tough case when they say, well, you're, you know, and this is what it just happened actually recently. A prison doctor was treating patients with some protocols, and they want to take his license, and they said, "What's your mortality rate?" 0. What do we do? I mean,
well, that's it. I mean, you know, the Department of Health called me and investigating as well, and I'm like, you do realize I'm conducting a clinical trial with the FDA, right? And you do realize I've lost no one. So what's the problem? So, you know, what are you going to do? You know, there's something going on. There's a pressure. There's a political pressure out there. It's going to get worse, in my opinion, before it gets better. But I think doctors are waking up. I think doctors are uniting. They're seeing, listen, I have an ER physician who basically got vaccinated, quadruple vax. He almost died from COVID. You know, it was supposed to protect him. This guy looks like Superman, you know, that vaccine was supposed to protect him. He got COVID twice, took Paxlovid twice, but he said it was the hardest thing he had to go through. And then you have physicians that haven't done anything and they're, you know, doing fine. So, you know, you and, you know, so many other physicians. Look at McCullough. McCullough's done fine. You know, he's all over the place.
Yeah, it's a hard thing. And I think that's what we have to just tell the truth. I think that's the bottom line. Don't exaggerate. Tell the truth. Say what you're saying, because we all have stories. And I see horror stories every day, and I think, gosh darn it, I don't want to. You know, it's just heartbreaking for me. It really is. It's for all of us. And when you say, "Gosh darn it," like, yeah, there's always
the other thing is encourage your patients to tell the truth. You know, encourage your patients. I think one of the things I did during the pandemic that was actually really good was I called the journalist not to talk to me, but I gave her the 3 names of my 3 patients that agreed to talk. And that was one of the patient was COPD, CHF, oxygen saturation of 77%, diabetic, 1 kidney, and he survived. And he said, I attribute my success to ivermectin, doxycycline, and zinc. So, you know, so I think at the end of the day, hearing it from, and I did that on purpose because I knew the FDA was going to come to my office, and I wanted them to see those are real people. You know, I even videotaped. Listen to this. I videotaped patients as they were oxygen, and I show the oxygen on the monitor as their oxygen is super low in their 60s or 80s. And then they're like, they can't breathe. And then you see them like 5 days later, they're like back to normal, new patient. The FDA saw one of those videos and they're like, are you kidding me, Dr. Hazan? I'm like, yes, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I want you to see. And the FDA agent was actually the daughter of a minister. So, because I was always like, you know, you hear so much noise out there. And I'm like, is the FDA working with me or against me or what's going on here?
Yeah, it's a scary time for doctors. There's no doubt. You know,
super scary. And, you know, of course, we got dinged because we didn't submit a form to the IRB on time because I'm juggling so many hats and I'm a hurricane. So, you know, in 25 years of research, never had a 483. Now I have like a 483 on my name, but we cleared it up. We cleaned up our records. We're going to make sure the calendar bunks me in the head and says, Dr. Hazan, you forgot to submit your form to the IRB. You know, these are the juggles, these are the fights we do every day, but this is in the name of
But
science.
you're a fighter, and I see you, and yeah, I love what you're doing, and
Yeah.
you give other doctors courage, including myself. So I thank you for your work and for,
Thank
you know, not just bowing down to pressure and saying, but when you know something works and you've researched it and you're seeing it, you have to stand up for the right thing.
You
and it
have
costs you, you know, but
to.
it's an honor to have you on, and
All
thank you.
Thank you for talking.
And have a great weekend. And I knew we'd
too.
run over, but my gosh, I have a million more questions for you next time. We're going to drag
Next
you back
time
on. We'll
do
talk
it.
about all your stuff. But hey, everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And this is a gem. Thank you. Hopefully we didn't offend anyone, but I think this is real. We're just having real doctor talk of what we saw and what we're seeing. And you have a hero here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. You know, have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.